Hey folks, I want to talk a little bit about oil. So I had some comments on an old video. It was a Hyundai that needed a water pump. I had to do the timing belt and the water pump on it, but a local garage said that it needed a new engine, that it was locked up or whatever. So they had it towed over to me, and it did not have hardly any oil in it. I don't think it was even registering on the dipstick. So I grabbed my jug of used oil and topped it off. Everybody's like, oh, used oil, you shouldn't put used oil in an engine, blah, 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 blah. Well, they're saying it's locked up. I'm going to check the oil before I try to start it, and I'm going to top it off. I'm not going to put new oil in it. Oil's getting expensive, right? If it's a junk engine, you don't want to put new oil in it, right? But I will also use used oil for those types of customers. Now, I am the kind of mechanic, I don't work on like many newer cars and stuff. I fix people's old rusty, crusty beaters with the heater that they use to go to the grocery store and get back and forth to work. And, you know, they're just trying to keep it going as long as possible. And I do those repairs affordable with affordable parts and get them back on the road. I don't fix everything all the time. You know, sometimes things are still wrong, but they're willing to live with those things being wrong until, you know, until they get the money to fix it, or until they get another car because this one finally died, right? So that's the kind of work I do, right? I don't work on 2025s, right? So I will use used oil in a lot of those cars because they will bring them over to me because people are just too busy with like television and internet and this like eating and sleeping and eating poison food and being tired all the time, being diabetic, being sick, being watching TV, right? They're so busy doing that they just get in their car and drive it, and they don't, you know, they stop and get gas, but they're too lazy to check the oil, or maybe they don't even know how to check the oil. A lot of people just drive cars and they know nothing about them, right? So I check my oil every time I get gas because it might not have a leak, but it might develop one, so you got to keep an eye on that, right? It's an older car. But they don't change their oil. They don't check their oil. You know, the last oil change I had was 2 years ago, you know, and I will just top it off. You know, I'll go out and be like, it's not even, it's registering a little dot at the bottom of the dipstick. I'll top it off with used oil so that it does not blow up while it's in my care, while I'm replacing the wheel bearing or whatever. So I will always check somebody's oil before I even go out and start their car after they drop it off. And I'll put used oil in it. I'll give the customer a choice to do an oil change while I have it. Normally they say no because they just have enough money to put a used wheel bearing from the junkyard in their car to make it go again. But at least it's oil. Now I change my oil at 50% use, 50% oil life left on the GM instrument cluster, right? I mostly drive GMs, right? I have a Ford truck, but I don't hardly ever drive that, just when I need to haul something. But all my other cars are General Motors. My son has a Honda Accord, but he doesn't always change his oil either, but he started going to Walmart for oil changes, so at least he's getting it changed. But I will save the oil out of mine. I change it at 50%. So it still has half of its life left, right? But I will put it in a jug and write use 530 on it, right? And I don't care if they bring me a car and it calls for 520. I will put 530 in it because some oil is better than no oil, right? And then I always give them the option to do an oil change while I have it up in the air and I'm working on it. But I don't do oil changes. Customers can't call me and be like, I need to come over for an oil change. It's just not worth it. You don't make enough money if you don't have a lift or a pit and everything to come out here, fire up the heaters, jack up the car, crawl under it, drain the oil, change the filter. It's just, you don't make enough money doing that. So I tell them to go somewhere else to get the oil changed normally. But if I have your car up in the air, I'll change it, right? If it's already up in the air anyway. And I change my own oil, right? Because oil changes are important. I want to make sure they're done correctly. I want to make sure that I drain all the oil, that I change the filter, that I actually do all this stuff that a lot of these oil change places are cheating people. You know, basically they're draining half the oil and then topping it off or whatever. I make sure I do it right because oil changes are important. As far as not changing your oil, right, it's going to wear out the bearings in the engine and stuff like that, but it's also going to cause oil leaks. All these rubbery gaskets that they have on cars these days will get hard, they'll get rock hard, they'll start leaking. Your main crankshaft seals will get hard and they will start leaking, and you'll have oil leaks because you don't change your oil, because it becomes acidic. And it gets microscopic amounts of like carbon buildup in it, and it's really microscopic, but it's abrasive. So most of your oils are pipeline blended. There's a few that are vat blended, like Shell Rotella. And so they put ingredients in the oil as it comes down the pipeline. They inject the ingredients into it. So that oil, you have to make sure when you use it, you really shake it up before you pour it in your car, because those additives have a tendency to settle to the bottom, and you want to shake them up and get them in the oil and then pour it out. But they do something called fallout, right? So your car's oil absorbs carbon left over from the combustion, right? And that makes carbon, and it slowly builds up in the oil. So it does something called fallout, where it absorbs that carbon and falls it out to the bottom of the pan, so that the rest of the oil doesn't have as much carbon in it. As the oil gets old, it runs out of those detergents that cause it to fall out, so that carbon builds up in the oil, becomes a microabrasive, becomes very bad for the engine, very bad for oil leaks. It becomes acidic, and it starts to eat all your gaskets and everything inside your engine, and it will cause it to wear prematurely and fail. Now, some engines can handle a lot, right? The 4.2 in my truck, it can handle a lot. It has nearly 500,000 miles on it. I haven't always kept up with the oil changes, but that's a exceptional engine, right? It's basically a 289 that they made the 302 out of, and they chopped 2 cylinders off the front of it. It was a 3.8 for a while. They bored that one out a little big. It's a 4.2. Those 3.8s and 4.2 V6s have a tendency to just never die. The 3.8 in my Buick's a good engine, right? Now, I think it's a 1.4 turbo EcoBoost or whatever in my wife's car. Those things are known for oil problems. So I really keep on top of that, and keep the oil changes up to date. But some cars can go longer without an oil change. Other cars will lose turbos. They have variable valve actuators that are all controlled by the hydraulic pressure in the oil. They'll get plugged up and stop working. So you really want to keep on top of the newer ones with good oil changes. Change your oil more often. I always say it's more important to change your oil often than it is to use a good oil, right? You can go get the magical unicorn fairy juice, extended high mileage, ultra platinum premium oil that's $50 at the AutoZone, and you can use that. But it's more important to change it more often. So I believe it's more important to change it more often. So I use Rural King brand oil, the Harvest King oil or whatever it is. And the 5W30 Platinum is Dexos approved for my wife's car. I use the conventional in my 2 older Buicks, but I change it at 50% use. That's about 3,500 miles, and I just change it, right? It's more important to change your oil than it is to use some super great oil that's supposed to last 12,000 miles, and it doesn't, right? They are just extending those maintenance windows out on cars because they want to lower the cost of ownership, and they just have to get you past the warranty, right? And then they don't care. But you want it to last longer than the warranty, so you need to change your oil and change it often. It's important, right? And yeah, I can use a platinum oil or whatever in my old 2006 Buick Lucerne, but it doesn't call for it, and I just use what it calls for. My wife's car does call for Dexos oil. I did use conventional in it once because I ran out, and it was fine, but I normally put the platinum Dexos in it, and just keep them changed. That will eliminate oil leaks. That will help to eliminate the oil feed line for the turbo on that one, to keep it from getting plugged up and breaking the turbo. It's just important. So, but anyway, that's when I used oil, right? Is when I have a customer that doesn't care about the car enough to change or check the oil, and they're low on oil and I have to top it off, or I'm diagnosing an engine that might be bad. I want to top it off with oil before I even attempt to start it, right? Because if it's not bad, I don't want it to go bad because it doesn't have any oil in it, right? So make sure that you leave me a comment down below. Tell me how often you change your oil. Do you buy the Ultra Unicorn Fairy Juice oil, or do you just buy cheap oil? Do you use like that special Lucas oil, or what? I forget what Ray uses. He uses some kind of special oil. He's big on the good oils. Or do you check your oil every time you get gas? Do you change your oil before it says it needs changed? Or do you wait until it needs changed and then pull into the Quickie Lube and get an oil change? Anyway, I'll talk to you all later. This is Tom, your Frugal Prepper.